Let's begin by taking a look at the logbook. So to do that, you simply tap on the Flights tab down at the bottom. By default, the system usually comes up in the Flight Following tab. There are two tabs at the top, one that says Flight Following and one that says My Flights. Flight Following has more to do with the flock network, so we'll talk about that a little bit later. But if you're not following any other users, Flight Following and My Flights are actually the same, so it doesn't really matter. At any rate, you take a look at the two tabs. Right now we're on the one labeled My Flights. My Flights you could think of very strictly as your logbook. It's just about you, not anyone else. So let's take a look at what you see here. It's not strictly speaking just a logbook in terms of keeping track of your flights. Like in this case, it keeps track of an endorsement. I have logbook entries that I may have typed in manually, so as the graphic would indicate, there's no track to it, as opposed to this flight over here, which was recorded by FlyQ's built-in data recorder and automatically record the flight so that we have a track for it, and so on, more like that. A couple more flights and so on. Now, if you don't like the layout here in terms of if you think that there's a lot of space being wasted perhaps by the graphic, not a big deal. Towards the top of the screen, on the upper right side, there's a button that looks like a list. It's currently white, meaning we're not in list view. If you tap it, it goes into what we call the list view. It's a much more compact view, much more like what you'd see on, say, Navlog. Now, I'm going to go back to the more visual view, though. One of the other things that you'll notice is at the very top, even in fact above the list of the individual flights, but below the Flight Following and the My Flights area, is a section that gives you various statistics. It tells you that I have 132 flights, my total duration is about 138 hours, distance about 200 miles, and that gives you statistics on the number of night flights, 14, and the number of hours, 12.2, number of flights in instrument conditions, and PIC, and so on. So you see a lot of statistics very quickly without even running a basic report. It just shows that to you right away. Pretty nice. Let's talk about a little bit of filtering now. For example, if I was interested in looking at all my flights from not all time, but maybe just in the last 90 days, there's a big search box towards the top of that, search friends, airports, and so on. On the right side of that is a picker that lets you pick time. So I could say, only show me the flights within, say, the last 90 days. Notice that we've been very busy creating the app, so I haven't had a lot of time to fly in the last 90 days. Only 8 flights during that time period. You tap that, and you can set that back to all time. Now let's say, though, they want to take a look at a particular flight. In addition to doing that time filtering, if there was a particular airport that I flew to and I don't quite remember anything about it, but I want to take a look at the flight again, I can type things like the airport ident, like RNT, which is for Renton. By the way, you can type it with a K if you want to, or without a K. You clearly see in the statistics it found one flight, so here's that flight. If there's another airport that you are interested in, maybe PAE, my home airport, Payne, you see some flights there. Oh, for example, that looks like an interesting flight. This flight was on July 12th, and it shows you some basic statistics about the flight. In addition to the graphic, you see that's 153 miles, and the duration was about 1 hour 40 minutes. So pretty straightforward. Now, on this flight or with any other flight, if you want to see more details, basically just tap almost anywhere within that area, within that cell, and it shows you a graphical, resizable map. The green is where you take off from, the red is where you land. So it looks like I took off from one runway and I landed on another runway. Pretty common actually at Painfield. In terms of standard logbook things though, the standard logbook entries are in the data column. So here is where you put things like aircraft identifier, what type of plane, you can put remarks in there, duration, all that kind of stuff. Now the flight recorder, like in this case, will automatically pre-fill most of that for you, but it does allow you to change it. So if the flight recorder says 1 hour, 1.5, but you said, well, some of that was really on the ground, so let's count that as 1.4. You can overtype that if you want to. You can enter hobs and so on. In this particular case, this is a flight that I made, so of course I have the edit button in the upper right corner, and I can go in and I can change things. So I can type in, for example, my hobs time, or I could do something like, say, night time was 0.3, whatever you want to do. And then you can hit the save button right there. Okay. The edit button is obviously not available if you were to look at somebody else's flight, and we'll get into that later. So that's how you do all the standard entries that you'd have in a logbook. In addition to having flights automatically recorded for you by the built-in data recorder, let me clear this filter, by the way. You can also hit the plus button on the far right corner and manually make a logbook entry. So if you want to, you can just type in whatever you like in terms of the data columns, the same as you would in most other logbook programs. I also want to show you a couple of other features to do with the logbook. So notice that in this particular flight here, on the graphic there, it also says +1 photo. What does that mean? That means when you tap on this, there's a photo tab. So you get the map tab, you get the data tab, and then you get the photos tab. And there's a photo that you can add whatever photo you want from a flight and so on. Of course, if you tap on it, you see it nice and big. You can look at it. You can hit the action button and share it, delete it, email it, whatever you want to do. Now you can also add other photos too. For example, if you want to do that, you just hit that action button. And notice that there's a lot of items on here. Share the image, which means to Facebook or Twitter or something like that, or print it. You have email and print, and so on. I'll pick this choice, Add Photo. That pops open the standard photo browser on your iPad. And I'll select a photo here. Maybe that was also during that flight. So let's see what I can find. Okay, let's say maybe it's that photo. Great, and there's that photo. Also, I should point out that if you choose to share your flights with other people, which is something that the FlyQ network does, and we'll talk about a little bit later, it's possible to take any specific flight and mark it as private. You see the switch on the right-hand side of the screen. Right now it's off. Simply turn it to on, and regardless of your privacy settings, that particular flight will never be shown to anyone but you. Okay, so that's kind of the basics on how you get data into the system using the iPad. I'm not going to show it, but you can also import, if you have log files from MyFlightBook or from FlyQ or potentially in the future other systems, you can go to our web-based system, which is called FlyQ Online, just flyq.seattleavionics.com from any PC or any Mac. And within the settings feature there, there's a whole section that lets you import log files created by these other applications. So for example, if you have 5-10 years worth of log files and you store it electronically in another format, in about 10 seconds you can import all of those directly into FlyQ EFB. It's very slick. So let's talk about reporting though. Once you put the data into the system, you typically want to get something out from it. Well, the stuff at the top that tells you flights 132, duration 136, when you combine that with the filtering and the time, you actually have quite a bit of information without even running a report. So, I mean, as I said, you can do things like, show me data for the last 90 days. Boom. I know that I have 8 flights, 2.8 hours, my nighttime, my instrument time, and so on is all right there. So without even running a report, you can get a lot of information. You can also filter that information by type of aircraft, by tail number. So for example, if I wanted only time in 172, I can type C172. And as you can see, those 8 flights drop down to 5. Okay, just hit the X button to clear it, and so on. But let's talk about running the more standard reports. You can get to the reports immediately from the Flights tab. You see on the top you have My Profile, Friends, and Reports. It reports. You have 2 different types of reports. You have text-based reports, essentially PDF documents, and then you have graphs, which are pie charts and bar graphs. So let's go with some of the standard ones. So on a text, I can do things like show me monthly activity. It takes it a moment to load the file. And here it comes. So you know how many flights and how many hours you took in each month. It's very simple, very straightforward. You can hit the action button in the right corner and email or print it, and so on. You can also do things that are a little bit more advanced. Like if you want to print out all of your logbook in something that really looks like a logbook, you can hit Logbook Details. If you have an extremely large logbook, like say several hundred entries in it, this may take a little bit of time to produce. But generally speaking, it will take about maybe 20 seconds or so to generate. Okay, so now you see the logbook comes up, and here you are. The logbook is a pretty standard format, although it's very compact, very easy to use. It gives you how many flights. It works on a per-page basis, carry forwards, so on. It gives you a spot to type in, rather put your signature. Endorsements and comments are listed there. So very, very straightforward. You can hit the action button and email it or print it, of course, and so on. Of course, it's very handy if you also use a time filtering or something else. If you have a very, very long logbook, it might be useful to say, well, only in the last year or something like that. So very easy to do. Let's talk about the graphs. So on the graphs, though, again, you just hit that graph tab over there, and you can do things like show me monthly activity, but now the monthly activity is in the form of a line graph, not in terms of a text-based system. So it looks more like that. So it looks like in September I had a lot of flights, or actually my number of hours, which is the blue line, was very large. The total number of flights, the green bar, is not necessarily huge. Looks like I was flying more about this time last year, although you can see that as time has picked up in the summertime, I'm flying a little bit more now. So it's one way of doing it, and again, you can print it and so on. Some of the other graphs on there are pretty nice. For example, if you want to see which airports you go to most often, you can go to the top airports as either a bar graph like this. So it shows you the most popular one. It only lists the top 10, by the way. So another way to look at that one would be top airports as a pie chart. So you tap on that. Same basic data going into it, but it's represented as a pie chart, not as a bar graph. You can zoom in, see what your most common airport is, which really the single biggest category is other, but it's all there. And when you take a look at that, you can hit the action button, and in addition to email and printing it, you can do something like share an image. Like if you want to publish that to, say, Facebook, you can do that. And there it is. And you can even publish this, by the way, to specific groups in Facebook. So you could say things like, if I want to put this on the group for flights above the Pacific Northwest, I hit the share button, and boom, it's shared. In fact, if I go to Facebook, you'll find that there it is, right there. I just posted that graphic a moment ago.